Hey, how's it going?
It's good. I'm in a car. Is that bad?
Guys, I'm super excited to introduce you to Helen Lenk. Helen and I met through a training that I did for the organization she used to work for, and we just hit it off. There are people that you meet in life that you're just like, that person I want to get to know better. And she was one of those people. She came up during one of the breaks of my session, and she was so great, just so positive, and just so into the Ripple agenda and philosophy that I was putting forward, that I just knew we were going to become great friends, which we did. We had a couple of lunches. We talked about different approaches to managing people and engaging. And she's moved on from that organization to do something new that she's going to talk about today. But at the end of the day, I wanted to bring her onto the podcast because she is one of the examples of what it means to engage and connect with somebody, take that chance, and then keep figuring out how you can add value. And sometimes that's not directly monetarily, sometimes it's not a business lead, sometimes it's just adding value to the relationship and continuing to work on the friendship. So I'm super excited to have Helen join me for the Ripple Effect podcast. So let's dive right in. Guys, I'm super excited to introduce you to Helen Lenk. Helen and I met, as I mentioned in the introduction, several years back, and we've continued to stay friends. I'm excited to have her on because she is kind of the epitome of a Rippler, and you're going to learn a lot about that as we go forward today. But Helen, thanks for joining the Ripple Effect podcast. How are you doing?
Thanks for inviting me. I'm doing great.
I love you're in your car, which is great. So this is a first for me. I love it.
It's my very, very fancy office. So
yes, I like it. I like it so much. Well, you and I met, just to give a little bit of background for our listeners, back when you were with University Federal Credit Union.
That's right.
And I was delivering a training, and you came up during one of the breaks. And I just remember, because it was an interesting training, great people. I really enjoyed it. But you were one of those ones, as soon as we took the break, you like beelined and came up and started talking to me. And I'm like, I just loved you. It was your personality, your enthusiasm, and just how great it was to interact and hear some positive comments. As a speaker or trainer, sometimes you don't always get that, at least in the middle of an event that you're putting on. So I really appreciated that. But then we're like, you and I need to get together for lunch, and we need to like talk. We need to find some ways to like ripple together. And we did, and have kept this friendship going for a number of years now. And so I'm so grateful for that. But I have to ask you, going all the way back to that event, what motivated you to come talk to me in the first place?
So I'm a learner, right? And you seek out like-minded people.
Yep.
And the whole rippling concept, leadership is influence, right? It can be positive, it can be negative. So the ripple can be a good thing or it can be bad, right? But like seeking out like-minded people. So it resonated with me what you were sharing, and that we have the ability to impact people on a day-to-day, minute-to-minute basis, in a way that doesn't just impact them, but it can also impact others, right? So beyond. So I was like, oh my goodness, I need to get to know him better. And, I like the concept. I've used it with my team. I've used parts of that with my teams, different teams that I've had within the credit union when I was there, to be able to use, in this new job that I have. So.
Well, I appreciate that. And you and I, when we got together for lunch, I mean, we had so much to talk about: the importance of, management teams understanding why it's critical to build relationships with their teams, how the influence has to start from the top and then, ripple to all levels of the organization. And especially in the banking and that credit union environment, where, especially with University Federal Credit Union at the time, was growing and expanding, has a major footprint in Central Texas, and obviously does things different than most financial institutions. And one thing that really stood out for me when we were meeting, we had that lunch, you were talking about how that it's a culture thing, right? At the end of the day, it's about building that true culture and having that clear, not only the mission of the organization, but ensuring that the people that you're bringing on recognize they have a responsibility to represent that brand, their job, role, and position not just 8 to 5, but when they're out in their communities and when they're interacting with everybody, because you never know who might become a client or a customer of the organization, or who might know a customer that could be positively or negatively influenced by that one interaction with the employee.
Right. Yeah. I'll say, and this is a big shout out to UFC or University of Federal Credit Union. So I've been in banking over 23 years. And so I've been in different organizations. I've been in the big corporate organizations. And then the credit union was my first entry into that world, or that part of banking. And I learned more about leadership compared to management, culture, and the importance of that culture there than anywhere else in my entire career. And I always used to say my worst day there is still better than, the best day at another organization which shall not be named.
Yeah.
But I loved it, and I thrive on that learning, and the people that impacted me there and still impact today is a huge blessing in my life. Again, not just in a career sense, but in a personal sense as well.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that stood out to me, and you and I have exchanged messages on this, is the fact that, you have as a manager the ability to not only influence, employee satisfaction and job performance, but you can change lives if you're a good manager, and talk about the ultimate ripple, right? So, can you maybe compare and contrast, without naming, the other organization, that you worked for that didn't quite do it the right way, but maybe give some perspective as to what you've seen, how it's done poorly, and then how it's done well.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is the previous organization was huge, right? It's a national organization. And so while I had good local leadership within the branch I worked at, above that, a whole different ballgame, right? And so you never really got to know any of the leadership above, except when they came along and they're like, okay, you guys are doing great, and how are you doing this? And we need that for the rest of the district or the region. But it was all about the numbers, right? It was, if we slipped for one day, like we were a top performing branch, and if we had one day that wasn't good, they came down hard, right? It was
Really?
at the bottom line. And so you just felt like a number, and kind of you didn't feel valued unless you were giving them what they wanted, right? Whereas with UFCU, it was, it's okay, we haven't had a great day, but why is that, right? It's digging into it. What's going on in a person's life that might be impacting their performance at work? And so there's a greater interest in the person. And it's not that, everyone talks about, oh, we do amazing things for our employees, and we love our employees, they're our secret weapon. But you've got to walk that talk, right? You on every level. For me personally, they walk the talk, and they expected me to do the same, and I expected my people to do the same. And so then we were able to take teams. I took 2 teams that were very broken, struggling in many, many ways, and was able to implement rippling, I don't know how to say it, just like ways that we were able to have a positive ripple across those departments, and then throughout the organization, right, and establish them up for success. And that's the biggest thing that's different, I feel, with that organization, that truly is about the people, and they truly do care about their employees, and they want to do. I worked with HR. I had a big team before I left there. We had about 70 employees, and a lot of them entry level, a lot of them not experienced in life, many of them going through mental health situations and health, physical health, all of the things, some behavioral issues. And so I lived in HR. I felt like I lived in HR. They made a little joke with me one day. I was in there having a meeting, and I left to use the restroom, and I came back, and they put a big couch against the door and put a sign up saying, "Not today, Helen." It was so funny, and they were recording my reaction and everything. But anyway, it's all about having fun and being real. And missing. Like we have these titles and we think, oh my goodness, I can't be friends with people and I'm their boss, and I have to have this line. And yes, to a point you do, because when it comes down to it, we have to get the job done. But you've got
Sure.
to be able to have fun and you've got to be real with people. And that's I found the biggest success I've had is doing that.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's depends on who you ask, right? About that philosophy of whether you can have a good, close personal relationship or a friendship with people you work with or people that you are that report to you or you lead. Some people are like, nope, that line has to be set in stone, and other people are like, this work environment that we're all experiencing. There are. I interviewed somebody yesterday that is an organizational change leader, and she said, none of us have experienced what we have just gone through and what we continue to go through. And she made a really valid point. She was talking yesterday, really amazing woman that I should connect you to locally. You'll love her,
Right.
Ali Oni. But she was talking about, if you think about what we've just gone through just in the last 90 days as people, right?
Right.
The economy impacts, there's war going on. We have a, continued to, fight off this, Corona, virus and, the pandemic and the fallout there. We have some very strong challenges, from, shootings and, potential legislation changing. I mean, all these things. She said, actually, she and a colleague were talking about it, that we just in the last 90 to 180 days have experienced more than some people did in entire generations.
Yeah.
Right? And the reality is that, how that ties back to the work is that managers and leaders, right, at the end of the day, have to understand that, really they're leading people and people first. And everybody has their own stresses. They have their own triggers. They have their own challenges that they're dealing with on top of everything that's outside of their immediate control and influence, which does have an impact on them. And the fact that a lot of these organizations sort of ignore that and don't recognize it, don't
Yeah.
spend the time necessary, you have to think that, those managers and leaders out there that are actually have taken the time to get to know the people and tried to establish some form of relationship with them are the ones that can have those more deeper, more intimate conversations about, hey, what's going on? Is everything okay? How's the family? And not just because you're asking the question like, hey, how was your weekend? It was legitimately interest in who those people are, and people can sense it and they can feel it. Don't, and you know that because you lived it, right?
Yeah. It comes down to three things. It's genuine, right? So people can tell if someone's not genuine, right? It's
Yep.
talking to somebody and they're talking back and answering your question, and you're like your head somewhere else, and you're not even giving them eye contact. You can tell when people don't really care. They're just like
Yeah.
lip service. So you've got to be genuine. You've got to be able to build trust, and that comes with time. It comes with them seeing your actions and again walking the walk, right? And then communication is
Yeah.
key, and it's the communication, it's the calming communication, right? It's the clear expectations, because we still have a job to do in whatever
Yeah.
the environment is. We still have a job to do, so it's keeping people calm and being very clear with expectations,
Mhm.
but also having that caring communication of, let's touch base. What's going on? How are you doing? What do you need? How can I help you? It's servant leadership, which is really important to me. And again, just joking around. I banter a lot. Like I'm sassy. I just sass.
No,
Any,
I've never seen that side of you ever once.
any worked with me, they're like, oh yeah. Yeah, and it doesn't matter your position, you're going to get sassed. And I've had to learn, to judge the audience and all the rest of it, and control that a little bit. But again, I am who I am,
Yeah.
whether I'm at home or at work, and people resonate with that.
Yeah.
They
I,
kind of yearn for that, I think.
I agree. And you mentioned something that's interesting. Trust. It takes time to develop. It takes time to, have people really fully give you their trust. But one of
Hmm.
the things that I always advise, especially a new manager or new leader, is that you start there and say, "This is my goal." Right.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I want you to know that you can come to me and have that conversation. Day one, I don't expect you to buy any of what I'm telling you or selling you, and I know that it's super critical for me to earn that. However, what I want to do is have you hold me accountable for that. I want you to know that that's what I'm striving for, where our end game is, what our goal is.
Yeah.
And I want you to help me get there. And
Yeah.
when I do things or say things, or I behave in a way that maybe is outside of that, where that could potentially compromise any of that goodwill that I'm building before it ever becomes trust, I want you to call me on that. And
Yeah.
because, like you said, that ties back to your third rule, which is really that communication piece, which is how we communicate, how we treat one another, how we interact and respond. If we are collectively focused on the same goal and the same mission, that's great. However, if we don't, or we're all left to our own devices to figure out how to get there without proper leadership, it's chaos,
Yeah.
and it leads to dissatisfaction and frustration. But if you have a leader that says, look, I don't know everything,
Yeah.
and there are going to be things sometimes that I have to share that are not great, and sometimes I'm going to have to give you some feedback you probably don't want to hear, but it's for your betterment, it's for the betterment of the role, the position, the company. And I want you to be able to feel comfortable to do the same. And it has to be a two-way street. And I know for modern day leaders, that's really challenging, because at the end of the day, a lot of people don't understand that you have a big responsibility to that emotional connection with your employees,
Yeah.
and building that connection and building that relationship with them should be one of the top priorities that you have on your daily agenda every day.
Yeah. I would say though that you've got to be very careful as well, because you can only do so much on the emotional level before
Yeah,
you will experience burnout yourself, right?
true,
And
true.
that is when I started in the last role that I had. Um, there was so many situations that people were going through, right? Like I mentioned earlier, it was mental, physical, just.
Yeah, yeah.
And one of the best pieces of advice I got from one of my leaders was, you have to learn how to accompany somebody to the roller coaster, but don't get on it yourself.
I
So
love that.
hard. Like, I like roller coaster rides, by the way,
Yeah.
but that's so hard. Balance, right? Like, I need you to know that I am with you, but at some point I also need to understand that I cannot get actually on that roller coaster, because if I did that with everybody, there's 70 employees, if I did that with every single one of them, then I wouldn't be able to serve them the way
Yeah.
I needed to, right?
Yep.
So
Well, yeah, and I do think that again comes down to, sort of setting the expectations on what it takes to build that trust, and the level of communication that you're developing there in that space to say, look, I get you've got family things going on, or you've had or experienced a death in the family, or there's challenges with you pick it, there's
yeah.
any number of things, right? But at the end of the day, I'm here to support and help you deal with that as best as you can during the work, but we still have to work to get
Yeah.
done. And I loved your analogy, right? I can lead you up to the roller coaster. I can be here when you get off that ride. But at the end of the day, I'm going to have the tickets, and I'll have a slushie for you when you get back. So it is a thin line that you have to walk, but it's an important one. And I find that actually, a lot of managers that I work with, I mean, they don't even want to acknowledge there's a roller coaster, right? Like we're in the fun park, but nobody's having fun, and we don't even know we don't want to look on the right side of the fun park, because that's where everybody's emotional roller coaster is. But you have to
Right.
show that you're acknowledging, at least, and aware of it, because it's super super key to building that that final outcome with the employee, I think.
Yes, I agree.
Yep.
Yeah. And it took me a while, and I'll tell you, it took us about a year of building that team back up. There's a
Yeah.
lot of broken trust with leadership, and just things that have happened, and so they see this crazy Scottish woman that a couple of them knew already, and so they were really excited, and it was really exciting for me to work with them, because I've known them since I started 10 years ago. But a lot of them, they were like, who is this crazy woman? And so yeah, it took about a year before we had a really strong team platform again to build on, right? That foundation. But it was
Wait,
worth
you're
every bit of it.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say it was worth every bit of it, of that time
Yeah.
to get to
uh
where we needed to.
it does take time, but the outcome was rewarding, I'm sure, for you and for them.
Yeah, well, for
That's
all of
awesome.
us. Yeah. Yeah, it was
And,
rewarding for all of us, and then it impacted the organization positively, right? So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's fantastic. And you mentioned you were Scottish. I thought you were from Texas. No, I'm totally kidding.
well, actually, I usually tell people I'm from Louisiana. And people, they look at me and they're like, "Is she being serious right now?"
Yeah.
So I just start laughing, and then it's pretty fun.
It's funny because I remember during our first lunch that we had, you learned that I was coaching a boys soccer team. I've been coaching soccer for a long time, and
Yeah,
our team was the Celtic FC, which you got a big kick out of because you're like
yeah,
nobody ever roots for the Celtic team over
yeah,
here or the Rangers, right? So it was
yeah,
it was kind of funny, but it's amazing how many folks have ties or family related to Scotland after I started coaching that team. They came out of the woodwork,
yeah.
so it's kind of a cool
I just, I'm
connection
just
point.
gonna educate all your listeners. It's soccer is football, the real football,
Exactly. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's
Football.
the
Yeah.
sport. It's the sport of the gods. So
Yes.
I'm just gonna leave it there. That's all I'm gonna
Yep.
say.
I love that. That's why we became fast friends, no doubt. So,
There you
you
go.
know, you touched on something though, relative to being from Scotland. I usually start these podcasts, but we had so much great stuff to start talking about. I just dove in, but I normally start these episodes with kind of an origin story. But can you give us a sense of kind of where you came from, kind of how you got here, and sort of how you became, the awesome Helen that you are today?
Now, the awesome Helen I am today is because of a lot of people that took their time to teach me and take me on and help to refine a lot of and give the opportunities, right? But yeah, I was born in Scotland. I am teased relentlessly about being Irish, which is very wrong of them. I was born in Scotland, and then my dad was in the Navy, the Royal Navy. Very
Yeah.
proud of that. And so we moved around a lot, and then he went into the police. So we bounced between Scotland and England quite a bit during my growing up years, and then finally settled up in the Shetland Islands, which is like 260 miles north of Scotland. So you can't go any further north in the British Isles,
Wow.
and that's where we ended up. And then that's where I got into banking and ended up moving south onto the mainland, actually into England with my job. Um, Served a mission for my church for 2 years, came back to banking, again ended up in the northwest of England, and that's where I met my husband. And he's a Texan. And so, and then it didn't take me long to realize that I was like, oh my goodness, he's the one. And I couldn't let the Americans get him. So as soon as he got home, I had to leave out. And it went from there, and here I am. And it was 18 years ago. Next
Wow.
month will be 18 years since I've been in the States. So I
Oh,
can
that's
say
awesome.
y'all.
Yeah.
I can say y'all.
Yeah.
That's pretty American, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Fixing to cut off, all those
Yeah.
things. Yeah.
The first thing he did when I arrived in the States, I arrived on the 2nd of July, and my birthday was the 4th of July, which is kind of ironic.
That is. Yeah.
And he took me shopping, and and he kidded me out. I got the cowgirl hat, and I got the boots, and the belt, and the plaid shirt, and what else? And the jeans. And I was kidded out as a cowgirl at the time. So,
I love that.
and we
Have
worked on a ranch for the 5th year of our marriage, and that was an experience.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah.
That's awesome.
And then I started banking again. So there you go.
Yeah. So,
So
so
yeah.
what motivated you for banking in general as a career path?
So I actually, my very first proper job was at a brand new Safeway store that opened up on the island. So it had
Hmm.
110 staff, and I loved it. Like I like to work. I'm a bit of a workaholic, and so I wanted to work in every department. And so I started as a cashier, and then they had me in the deli, in the bakery, in the coffee shop, and the butcher. They had a butchery on site, like a butchery. It's not how you say it, but anyway, they had a butcher shop
Yeah.
on site, like everything, right? And then I got approached and asked if I wanted to cover our personnel manager's maternity leave. So I'm 17, and I'm like, sure, I can do that. And so I covered it. Apparently, did a good job because she didn't come back, and they asked me to stay in the role. So by that point, I was 18, And I did it for about a year, but I realized, I mean, everything, hiring, firing, training, disciplinaries, just, scheduling, payroll, the whole works. I just realized I didn't have enough people experience.
Yeah.
And it caused me a lot of stress. My manager was bipolar, I swear. I don't know if I can say
Oh,
that. Like one
yeah.
minute he's like really awesome to work with, and the next minute, like you just locked your office door and stayed out of the way. It was just
Jeez.
anyway, what not
I
to
think we've all
be.
had managers like that at some point in our life. So
Yeah, but you learn, okay, I don't want to ever be like that. But
yeah.
anyway, and it got to the point where I was, somebody said to me, you'd be really good in banking. My mom used to be in banking, and there was a position open. Bank of Scotland was the organization that I started out in, and I went for my interview, got the job, and that was it. That's how it started. I started as a teller, worked my way up into banking, was part of an experimental team, got to move down into England with that team, and learned incredible things there. Learned how to speak in front of people and present. And then long story short, I came over here and I started with a big corporate company, and just got back into banking again, and again just grew the career. You know,
That's
I
awesome.
don't know. It's just kind of just ended up growing, and I've just loved it, and I've loved what I've learned, and I've loved the all of the examples of management and leadership that I've been able to experience, and I think that has helped me to be who I am. Right, you pick and choose. All right, this is something I really want to develop, and then this is
Yeah.
something that I really don't. But I've also I've sought out mentors both within and out with the organization, who I knew would just tell me things as it was. And so I've been able to have hard feedback that's
Yeah.
helped me, as well as the positive stuff, right? And being open to that feedback and willing to change has been a big part of my development. So
That's awesome. Well, and now you've kind of switched directions with your career. So can you give us some
completely,
mindset of what you're kind of doing day to day now, and director of
yeah,
operations for this new company? I mean, that's
yeah,
we're lucky to have
yeah.
you.
It's a big role. So the last 14 months have been really difficult for me, as a type A. I had a pretty bad accident where I came off a horse at speed, and
Oof.
I ended up with some pretty severe head damage or brain damage,
Oh,
and it's taken this 14 months and lots of therapy and neurology and needles, lots of needles, horrible,
oh,
and lots of stuff. And it got to the point where my company UFC, they were incredible with me, like every step of the way. They supported me, they supported my family, they
that's
kept in
great.
communication. But it did come to the point where they had to make a business decision, right? To kind of end that
Hmm.
not relationship, because we still have, I'm very close with people there, but just it was time to move on for them.
Yeah.
So, but 3 days before that happened, and I didn't know it was coming, I got into a conversation with a friend of mine who is incredibly intelligent. I wouldn't say this to his face. Incredibly intelligent, being part of multiple startups. He's a consultant in town, very well known in a lot of circles. And we had never talked shop before, but they came over for dinner, him and his family, and we started talking about our leadership philosophies. And as we were discussing that, he started sharing about this company that he has started himself. Like, he's not consulting for other people.
Wow.
He's the CEO of this company. And it's a technology product company, that will service the legal industry.
Wow.
And so he just started talking to me about it. It was very exciting, very cool. But of course, I'm with UFCU. I'm not,
Not
interested
looking
beyond
necessarily.
that's
Yeah.
really cool. 3 days later, I got the phone call that it was the decision had been made, that we needed to terminate the employment at that point. And I don't know everyone's belief systems or not, but when I look back, I can see God's hand in everything that happened. Would I have voluntarily left UFCU? No, I am a very loyal person, like very, maybe to a fault, I don't know. But it had to happen because then this other opportunity showed up, which was a higher position, right? A higher title, if you want to say,
Yeah.
interest, but it's a director of operations. And so I've come into the organization. It's a startup company, never done a startup before. I've always had that security blanket of an already established institution. And I am having so much fun. It's like I have autonomy and empowerment to just get on with stuff and do
Yeah.
stuff. If I need to make a decision about something, it can happen quickly. If I need a tool, I can go and research and just get the tool. There's no bureaucracy, there's no red tape. It's like we need what we need to get this going and to get it going well. And that's really refreshing. That's just very
Yeah.
different from a corporate, entity. And then working with Isaiah has just been a blast already. He's my CEO, and we work very closely together and getting to know the team. I mean, I only started last Wednesday, so I'm very green. But again, at the end of the week, Isaiah said, "Well, you definitely made your presence known, and it's awesome." And I'm like, "Oh, well, that didn't take long." Again, just being who I am and having fun right off the bat. And I think some of them are like, is she really like this? And they'll find out who I am. But yeah, it's good, and it's a different approach, it's a different mindset. I have to carry myself differently, in a sense, because I am on that, it's this first rung of this executive level, so that's a new learning for me. But at the
Sure.
same time, I want people to do their work and to have fun with it and to have passion with it and to know that there is that open door. We can have these feedback loops and there's not retribution, and I get to build that. I get to practice my leadership philosophies in a brand new organization, and that's
Yeah.
really thrilling. That's exciting. So it's a
Oh,
huge blessing.
that's awesome.
Yeah,
Well, congratulations. They're
thank
lucky to
you.
have you for sure, but no
I'm
doubt you're
lucky to
just
have
going to kill it in this role. I guarantee you, you'll do great, and your folks are lucky to to have you as their
thank
leader. I
you.
think that's fantastic. So, one of the things that we do in this podcast is, I've got to ask you a couple of Ripple specific questions, right? So,
Do
are
it.
you
Do it.
are you ready? All right.
I'm
So,
ready.
what do you view yourself? What do you view as your superpower?
So this is not blowing my own trumpet. What I have been told time and time again is I have a natural ability to read people, um, quickly, like to kind of understand how they are, what their mentality is, how far I can go with the whole SaaS thing, and if there's a problem, like being able to sense that pretty quickly and being able to hone in on it. I think that that's a superpower. Relationships are so they're critical to me. I remember starting at the credit union, and I wanted to get to know the executives fast. And number one, because I'd never had access to executives before,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
big national company, you don't ever see them. But also the managers around me and bankers and all levels, right? I wanted to get to know people really quickly, and that internal networking was so powerful because
Yeah.
it opened up doors, and it's not doing it with that agenda in mind, but it opened up doors that I wouldn't necessarily have walked through. I'd siloed myself in my career. I knew exactly where I was going. Nothing else was of interest, right? I had this
Yeah.
path and the blinkers on. And I had a aha moment where I went from people management to taking on ATMs. And I would never have done that if I hadn't had the relationships and the confidence of other people around me to kind of push me into a risk that I'd never considered taking. And it's been like that my whole career, right? So it's building the relationships, but being able to read people, and then just having what's the word? Um, Instinct
Yeah.
on how to do things. So
Oh, that's awesome. Well, let me ask you a follow-up, sort of a ripple question that kind of ties to this. But if you were mentoring or guiding someone new that's coming into an organization that has a lot of that kind of management hierarchy and structure, and there's silos already established, that can be super intimidating for someone because they're the newbie, right? And not really sure, the rules of engagement. But what advice would you give somebody in that coming into that environment to sort of like throw caution to the wind and do what you did, which was to go,
yeah.
make yourself and your presence known and get acquainted and start building those relationships.
Yeah, I think that the silo busting can only happen when you have people that want to break it down, and that you're not territorial about
Hmm.
the area that you are over, right? That you're working in, and having very open, candid conversations with other departments and saying, look, how can I help you? And here's how I think you can help us, and breaking the walls down. And if you do that enough across an organization, magic starts to happen. And
Yeah.
here in this role, one of the things Isaiah and I talked about before I came on board was we have an opportunity to make sure silos don't happen from the beginning, right?
Yep.
And that's
Yep.
hard because
Yeah.
some people are coming into the organization more entry level, others are senior, and they don't understand, or they've not experienced that as much, right? And so the communication around that is critical. Me supporting Isaiah, so it's not just Isaiah saying those things, but me coming in and on my own and being able to say, hey guys, we need to have teams, cross-functional teams, right? So when you're having these stand-ups every morning, there should be somebody from each team on there, and so we're working towards things like that.
Oh, nice.
um, but it's just, again, it's all about that communication and not being afraid to be professionally candid with those conversations, and offering yourself as a help, right? It's not, hey, what can you give me? It's what can I
Yeah.
help you, right?
Yeah.
And that's that ripple, because that
Yeah.
has an impact. So,
Absolutely. I love that. So, one question I would have is, for all your experience and where you're at and what you've done in your life, you probably have somebody that you kind of hold in high esteem as someone that maybe is a kind of a hero or a really solid mentor. Who is that person, and what have they meant to you?
I have a few. um, One of them is my old CEO, Tony Boudet. A lot of people in the Austin area will know him. It's funny because he meets with every new hire that ever gets brought in, right? So
Yeah.
he'll have a meeting every month, and the hires that have been brought in during that time frame will go and they'll sit with him, and he will talk to them about, it's four different categories of person. Which one are you in? Are you somebody that's coming in, you're completely open-minded, you're going to buy into the UFCU culture and you're going to give it everything you've got? Or are you at the other end of the spectrum where you're going to try to teach us, how you feel the organization should be, and it could be very different from what our culture is and not good, and you would go through that anyway. And he was so impressive, and I went up to him afterwards, and he's CEO, and I'm like, can you be my mentor? And at the time he was just like, he's like, I can't really, he was so busy. And but he gave me some names of other people that could be mentors, but without him realizing it, I still stole him as a mentor, and I would watch him. I would learn from everything he said. He got sassed like everybody else, but he sassed right back. He was one of the ones that really impacted me in the whole "you're from Ireland" thing, and I'm like, it's not Ireland, it's Scotland. So we have this balance the whole time. And then another one. Oh, but I hope they don't mind me using their names. But Michael Crowell he took me under his wing. He's the one that I sat down in his office, and he's executive VP, right?
Hmm.
And I'm a department manager, and we sit down in his office and we start talking about the department that I was to take over. Or at the time, we were talking about if I should or not. And it wasn't even an interview. It was the most like passionate, energetic, super exciting conversation I've ever had about taking on another role until this last one. And his confidence in me and his direction and teaching and being willing to not hold back when I needed to hear the hard things. And I would consider him a mentor as well. And then the last one is Jodie Peterson, and she knows she's no longer with UFCU. I went through some hard personal stuff during that 10 years that I was with UFCU, and she was a woman that I could go to, no judgment. We could talk personal as well as
Yeah.
business. She was very integral in the people development side of the business at UFCU. And so having her as a sounding board and learning from her and the friendship that we still have to this day is really important. So yeah, those are three,
Oh, those are
different
three good
people.
ones. Yeah, and you, of
Yeah,
course, I know Jody. Haven't talked to her in a number of years, but she was instrumental in bringing me in initially to UFCU.
right.
So I,
She's
uh,
amazing.
I, I certainly miss her, and so when you do talk to her, you need to tell her I said hi, and I still think of her very
Will.
often.
Yeah,
So yeah,
I
and you'll just make all three of these people famous on the podcast. I mean, you're gonna have
There
to
you
share
go.
it with her when it launches. So
There
there
you go.
you
It's
go.
all good stuff. It's all good stuff.
Last
Yeah,
question I would have for you before we end is, and I'm sort of excited to hear this answer from you because I'm sure it's going to be brilliant. But
the
what does the
pressure.
ripple? Well, yeah, no pressure, no pressure. What does the ripple effect mean to you?
So I think I always knew that I could have influence, but the ripple effect is intentional influence, right? So that's what it means. It's that intentionality to forcibly make ripples, sometimes tsunamis too, like really get it moving. And to see other people do the same thing, right?
Yeah,
So the last role I had managers that were under me, so I wanted to train them to have the same kind of impact in their own way and ripple effects across, the teams that we had. Um, and so it's far greater than that, but it all comes down to intentionality, and that's one of my favorite words, right? We can go about doing things, but if we're not super intentional about why we're doing it and what we're trying to get out of it, um, it's not maybe as effective as it could be,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
It's not as
absolutely.
far-reaching as it could be. So I think that's what it means to me. Um, I also like it because when you think of a ripple itself, like if you're throwing a stone and it has that ripple, it's a very peaceful thing. It's not some big loud, it's a peaceful process, and a calming process. And in this insane world that we do live in, I refuse to have fear. I refuse to get all down in the dumps about it. I want to have joy, I want to have hope, and not ungrounded hope, right? And the ability to ripple and to have that. Yeah, no, I was just saying that, that you have this calmness, right, that from the ripple. It's not this big loud event. And I was saying that in this crazy world, where there's a lot going on, you need that, right? You need to be able to impact people in a really positive way that isn't all loud and in your face, that allows them to be able to have hope and, and have fun and be able to move on, even though everything around is going crazy. So,
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I love that. Well, I mean, what a perfect way to encapsulate that definition and sort of your approach on what the ripple means to you. So thank you for sharing that. I am so grateful that you agreed to do this. I am such a huge fan of everything that you do, and I'm so grateful for our friendship. And it's just a great, perfect example of how two people who may not have known each other come together in a
yeah,
very random circumstance, and these opportunities happen and present themselves to you all the time. And if you don't take the time to actually say, "Hey, look, I'm going to stop, pay attention, get to know somebody, assert myself into it, and have a conversation," you miss so many great opportunities. And I'm so grateful that you came up to talk to me. I'm so grateful that we hit it off and connected, on a professional level, and then, struck up this friendship. And, you're amazing in every sense of the word.
well, and I right back at you. Again, like-minded people, and I love that you have gone out and you've taken this concept and you're sharing it with the world, and alongside everything else that you're doing as well. And I like your passion about it, and just your positivity and your drive. And I just love the opportunity to speak with you like this. And yeah, if there's anything that I can help with, or vice versa, let's do it.
Well, I appreciate
It's
that more than you know. So, how if people wanted to kind of keep up with what you're doing, maybe feel free to share the website of the new company in any way that they might follow you, like on LinkedIn or any social channels that you might want to
yeah,
promote.
I'm definitely on LinkedIn. Just Helen Lenk, Lenk. I'm very exciting with my name. And the company, the company itself is called Scribe.ai. So it's
Okay.
SKR.ai. LenkiBE.ai. So you can definitely look that up on LinkedIn. I'll start posting a lot more on there. And Facebook, you can look me up on Facebook too. But yeah, if there's any advice that I can give people, or if anybody feels they can, teach me stuff, I am open. I'm open to it. I want to get networking again now that I'm back in the saddle. Get networking in the area, and just share. It's all about sharing so that we can grow.
I love it. Well, you are awesome. I'm so grateful that you joined for the Ripple Effect podcast, guys. This has been a great episode. We'll be back again with another, episode of the Ripple Effect podcast very soon. But until then, Helen, ripple on.
Thank you. You too. See you soon.